It's my pleasure to moderate this panel with some very distinguished guests and on a topic which is really ultimately the central to a lot of the discussion that has taken place on climate resilience and recovery, and it's all about, at the end of the day, about communities and about individuals who constitute those communities. We'll try and sort of understand how communities do get involved at different levels, and also to unpack a little bit on what it constitutes to be a community and how harmonious or otherwise communities can be. So it's my pleasure to introduce the panel to you. So on my immediate left is Mr. Jonas Tetangco. He is the country representative for youth services in the Philippines. Hello? Yeah. In the Philippines, and he brings more than 28 years of experience in international development. He has led and supported large-scale foreign assisted programs funded by partners including DFAT, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and JBIC. His professional expertise spans program leadership, capacity strengthening, and organizational development, with extensive experience designing and delivering leadership and capacity building initiatives in the Philippines, Australia, and Indonesia. Sitting again to my left is Mr. Rashid Bajwa. I think the development community in Pakistan is familiar with Dr. Rashid Bajwa. He has been heading the NRSP since the beginning, since it started in 1991. And I think most of you would be familiar with the NRSP, the National Rural Support Program, which is the largest not-for-profit company which is working in the area of rural support. In recognition of NRSP's unmatched microfinance service, the organization has been honored with the distinguished Best Non-Banking Finance Company Award in 2023. In recent years, Dr. Bajwa has successfully established an agriculture value chain company that integrates small and poor farmers into a vertical value chain in sugarcane and rice. Dr. Bajwa has successfully set up the NRSP Microfinance Bank, which has investors including the IFC, KFW, and the Acumen Fund. Today, the NRSP Bank is the third largest microfinance bank in the country with 145 branches. It is the only microfinance bank to have been given an Islamic micro-banking license also. In recognition of Mr. Bajwa's services, the government of Pakistan has awarded him the Sitare-e-Imtiaz, and Mr. Bajwa holds a master's degree in public health from Nuffield Institute of Health, UK, in Leeds, UK, and he is a graduate of the King Edward's Medical College. Then on the other side of the aisle is Dr. Fozia Parveen, who is an environmental scientist from the Gilgit-Baltistan region of Pakistan, and currently serves as an assistant professor at the Aga Khan University's Faculty of Arts and Sciences, with an affiliation to the Institute of Educational Development. She blends scientific and indigenous knowledge to advance sustainable development with a strong focus on sustainability education and training. Her research interests also span water and wastewater treatment, microplastic pollution, environmental microbiology, and promoting behavioral change towards sustainability. Dr. Fozia has been deeply engaged in climate and community action. And she has worked in that regard in both the KP and Punjab provinces in Pakistan. Dr. Fozia holds a DPhil in engineering science from the University of Oxford and has done graduate training at NUST and holds a BS from Fatima Jinnah Women's University. And last but not the least is Adam Savelli. Adam is based in Hanoi, Vietnam, and he leads the CGIAR Climate Security Team in Asia Pacific. He is a climate, peace, and mobility specialist at the Alliance of Bioversity International, with a focus on climate-related mobility, community-led adaptation, and resilience building. Adam is also a PhD candidate at Humboldt University in Berlin, where his research aims to identify technical entry points for improved operational impacts across the humanitarian development peace nexus. So this is our distinguished panel. So I will start very broadly and ask the panelists to first give us a brief description of their own experiences in climate-stressed and climate sort of vulnerable regions, or where climate events have occurred, as to how community responses have taken place, and also how and what initiatives the communities have taken on their own. Shall I'll mix it up a little bit. Bajwa Saab, would you like to go first?
When you look at this topic, there is a theoretical aspect to it, and then what is the practical side of it. When you look at the topic, community participation in terms of climate change and the kind of disasters which are happening, it's very important to understand 4 areas. One is that it has to, you need to have local knowledge, which means there has to be a context. We need to know the needs and what are the challenges we are facing. The second most important thing is that it has to have an ownership, which means that taking the people who are affected take charge of the recovery. The third important is that it has to be inclusive. So the element of inclusivity has to be there, which actually means comprehensiveness, which means all-encompassing, as well as equity, that it has to be, everybody has the equal kind of a share in that. If we do this, then the recovery becomes very fast, and you can mobilize resources very quickly. Now, how does it happen? Theoretically, is that there has to be a participatory planning in any recovery efforts, including what are the design and how do we plan. It has to have a very important capacity building element, which means community involvement, skills, knowledge, and resources. Another very important area is inclusive decision making. And lastly, collaborative partnerships between government, NGOs, and the private sector. So this is the context. Now, if you put all this together, this is one side of it. The other side is that in Pakistan, there has been a slow revolution. Took us about 35 years to create a network of community organizations. And that network is become so strong now that it is now a household name in development jargon. For example, if I say, what is VO, Village Organization? Everybody knows about it. I think when I started work, very few people knew, only northern areas would know what a VO is, or even a LSO, a local support organization. So all this structure was laid by a duo. There are two people who Pakistan must acknowledge. One is Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan. Most of you know him through the Urangi pilot project, but very few people know that he was the pioneer and the architect, along with his student Shoaib Sultan Khan, to set up the NRSP, the Aga Khan Rural Support Model, which is actually the epitome of social mobilization. And that kind of beacon has spread across South Asia. For example, in India, Shoaib Sultan has, under the UNDP program, South Asia Poverty Alleviation Program, has been able to organize 1 million women households. In Pakistan, 10 million rural households. In Pakistan, the same thing through the RSP, the rural support programs, including the national and the provincial and the Sindh Rural Support Organization. Now the network of organized households is more than 8 million. Now this network is up and kicking. And people who are smart enough to use this network are the ones who are successful. Let me now come to the SPHF and the story of SPHF. I think what the government of Sindh did was that it used the same communities which were organized by the NGOs, including the RSPs, and built upon the program. And that has created a history. I mean, never ever in the history of the Sindh province has this kind of a successful program been done on a scale which is unimaginable. 2.1 million houses to be built. I mean, just imagine. And you probably, some of us saw the interview of the Sindh Chief Minister when he's saying that when Mr. Bilawal said, we want to build houses, and said, yes, but nothing happened, and tomorrow he started asking why it had happened. And then, of course, Mr. Khalid Sheikh, who really took over this and understood how it was done. And so, at the heart, it is not the partner organizations which have done the wonder, which we are all witnessing. It is actually these organized communities which have really participated. We are just a conduit, a go-between the government, the SPHF, and the communities. But the fact of the matter is that it is these organized communities. In Sindh, there is a very different element to it as well. Most of these organized households are women. So the net result is that the kind of seriousness in social mobilization is beyond comprehension in any other province I have seen. So the stronger networks which you see in Sindh, I can tell you, is going to lead a silent revolution. There is going to be a time very quickly when, if the government continues to involve these communities again and again, you will see that Sindh, rural Sindh at least, I'm not talking about the urban, I don't know how it works, but at least rural Sindh is very quickly going to come and get at par with the Punjab Sindh. And that is going to be a revolution. I know that at one point we would say, oh, Sindh has gone, it's very backward and this, that. Nothing, sir. At this stage, for example, when you see this kind of things happening, for example, the Sindh government is also using the same approach for the People's Poverty Reduction Program, which is again designed and implemented homegrown program, which has led to women's empowerment, increases in livelihoods, and obviously going from where they were to where they are today. Lastly, over the last 35 years, what I found is that house is a nucleus for any poverty graduation strategy. If you have a house, you can build around training, you can build around capacity building, you can do, asset distribution, anything. Without this house, whatever you do, as soon as the donor goes away, everything nullifies, goes back to zero. So the house, which since the government, I must acknowledge, has taken the lead. I was yesterday in the P&D Punjab government, and they're all talking about what is Sindh doing? I mean, what are they doing? I mean, 2.1 million houses. Everybody is edgy now and wants to replicate this program. And Sindh taking the lead, I think, if you have this as a nucleus, and if you completely eliminate homelessness through this mechanism, and then you can piggyback, you can add on activities, whatever activities we do in development, you will see that rural Sindh households will actually permanently graduate out of poverty. And just not theoretical, it is something which is going to happen within the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Bajwa Asad. That was very comprehensive overview of the initial stages of the rural support program, and also bringing it down to the landmark housing project that's undergoing in Sindh. We'll zoom out a little bit, and Jonas Tetangco can tell us more about how community involvement takes place, or what are the issues and the processes in Indonesia and Philippines? Yeah. In Philippines mainly, he says. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, probably just in terms of context, as some of you might know, the Philippines is one of the most climate vulnerable and disaster-prone countries in the world. And because of this fact, a few years ago, CRS in the Philippines decided to shift our programming from doing response, emergency response, to disaster preparedness, and then climate resilience capacity development. And over that time, we've implemented a number of climate resilience projects. And what we've really learned is that climate resilient recovery works best when communities are not consulted at the margins, but really embedded in the center of governance and decision making. And how is that done? First, we had to do a deliberate shift from consultation to co-governance, really integrating multi-stakeholders in the governance systems within local governments. In the Philippines, and probably in most countries where you're from, local governments are often the main drivers of developing climate change adaptation action plans, disaster risk reduction management plans. And in those instances, it's often really just people within those local governments that are involved in the development planning and the action planning. And because of this, there are bound to be programs that are not fit to the community's context. So what we have tried to really champion with a lot of our local governments is to make their processes and their governance structure inclusive. Where before there would usually be just department heads of local governments that are part of technical working groups, we influence them somehow to also include different sectors coming from women, faith-based organizations, CSOs, persons with disabilities, and others, so that it really captures what their needs are and how these need to be reflected in the plans. The second lesson for us is also about bridging sectors. So bringing these stakeholders, convening, our role then becomes a convening role. Where these stakeholders, you rarely see them planning together. We brought them together in a planning process where everyone is able to really contribute through the technical working groups. And of course, in terms of our role, it's really also just providing that mentoring support. We've found that these technical working groups, and after they are formed, they actually are formalized through executive orders that are signed by the chief executives. It becomes formal, it becomes institutional, and therefore it is sustained throughout throughout, not just during our project life, but beyond the project life, which is also very critical. Another example is in climate risk communication, where before it usually would just be people within the local governments that would be developing climate risk communication materials. We involved the actual communities, persons with disabilities, academe, other CSOs in the development of those materials. We pilot tested them with these actual users and included their feedback into these materials. And so in that way, it builds trust, it builds ownership and uptake, which are really essential in climate resilience. And finally, participation really needs to be sustained beyond project life. And so through having those mechanisms like executive orders, there would be permanent members of these technical working groups. They would have regular meetings. They would be provided some form of budget within the local government. So this way, it can be sustained. So yeah, that's probably for now.
Thank you very much. This is a very interesting and useful perspective as to how communities work with local governments in the Philippines for creating new technologies and initiatives. We come back to Pakistan, and Dr. Fozia Parveen has worked both in KP and in Punjab on climate related and on mobilizing communities, from what I understand, in both regions through education initiatives. So how does education initiatives increase community capacities and also shed some light into diversity of communities that you experienced in KP and in Punjab?
Fast forward, I became a professor in a university. I started teaching students, and it was so surprising that students do not know some of the bare basics about the environment, pollution, sustainability in general. And wherever I went, so I was invited to a lot of places to speak. Wherever I went, the underlying message that I had with me, based on the interactions with people and communities in general, is more education and awareness needs to happen on this. We need more education and awareness. And by the third year of my undergraduate teaching, I said, wait, who's supposed to be doing the education awareness? I'll do it, because actually early education, early awareness is much easier than teaching with advanced tech in higher education. So that's how we started co-creating books, awareness material on climate change. I was already working with youth. And like I said, the need for awareness was very, very evident. And we started creating these resources, and no one had read my Oxford papers, for example. But so many people came to us and said, we're using it in our school, we're using it in our communities, we're using it in our youth programs. And suddenly my perspective shifted, because as an educator, I want for people to look at the work that I do. And I realized it wasn't high-tech work in the context of Pakistan. It was a basic to education for climate change, or education for environmental pollution or environmental sustainability. So fast forward, we have now developed around 15 books which are open and free, which are taken up by several schools. We developed several teacher training programs with the institution that I was a part of at Aga Khan University, but ultimately I wanted to do a little more. And I was lucky that I got a grant where we worked with, so the model was, again, it's a learning cycle. One where we brought passionate teachers into a room and trained those 50 teachers in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and asked for a period of 1 year, because otherwise these trainings were very sporadic. We had no idea where they were coming from, where they were going back to. So I mentored them for the year. They were supposed to problematize their local problems and find a solution and implement it. I was only supposed to mentor them. And we reached thousands of people, because they were in their communities, they were in their schools, but we realized that there are systemic challenges, and it has to be dealt at a system level. So whether it's going to the DEOs and getting permission for these teachers to come and attend the training, or doing something, it was slightly more complex. And, but we had a lot of learning. We have these teachers who are so active and so ambitious that they're still continuing. Two years down the line, they're still active in their communities and schools, and they're working with their local religious leaders, they're working with their schools, their communities in general, and have now become these master trainers who are training others on this. But there was still some gap, right? And the gap was systemic. So thankfully, Abid Saab sitting here, the project that I'm working on now has indirectly come to us from the government, because the urban unit has given this grant to us. And this time the mandate is not climate change education, but WASH education, which is very relevant to the conversation that we're having here. And this time, instead of training the teacher, our objective was for my trained team to go and act in the classroom, because even though I trained the teachers last time, I did not know if there was true transformation in the classroom. That was in the hands of the teacher and what they report and how they report it. But this time, our team went, and they went to the classrooms. We designated the activities. We defined how we'll assess it. We made the engagement continuous. And this time also we have an online lecture, an online course, a booklet again for teachers to implement that can be again used by anyone around the country. And almost 5,000 students reached across Murray and Kotli Satya, where this project is happening, a different model. But the last thing that I wanted to add here before I pass the mic back to you is the strength of a government agency coming in, because like I said last time, I had to write a letter to the district education officer and wait for them to give approvals for the teachers to come and attend my sessions. And sometimes that would take days or weeks. This time, because the local government was on board with us, we not only collaborated with the education department, but for example, when we went to communities, we also asked them, we will clean this nala with you. We will bring Sutra Punjab on board. We will ask them to install the bin for you. Can you promise us that you will not put your trash in this nala again? So the dynamic in which we operated was different, because we were not just saying we'll go to departments, we were actually asking departments to put a bin in the school, or we're requesting them to put a rainwater harvesting unit in the school because the school does not have access to water. And so systemically, I think we're also not just evolving in terms of educating the communities, but understanding how systems work and how you can benefit from the involvement of the government or a government arm in what you do in education.
Thank you. So we move on to Adam, last but not the least. Adam, you are based in Hanoi, and you are doing a PhD also. So we take this opportunity to get into some conceptual issues as well as what your experience is. along the humanitarian development and peace nexus. So communities are climate stressed, and in many cases there are issues other than climate which are developmental in nature or security wise also. So how do communities respond to different facets of climate, development, security or peace in your experience and in your research work that you're undertaking?
Sure. Thanks for the question. Thanks everyone for attending. I think that there are three main points that I can bring out through my personal experience. And I'd pull from research that we've led in the Philippines, here in Sindh, and then also in Bangladesh. The first major point is one that Fozia has already made that I'd like to echo, that the main drivers of resilience are communities themselves. This is people coming together to support one another in times of a climate hazard or a conflict hazard or any sort of risk. This is what we see time and time again. Now, that's very interesting because being at a forum like this, where there are lots of agencies and organizations represented, there's lots of talk about community-led responses, community-based recovery, and that's great. This is very important. And over again, we do see communities being consulted and participating in projects, but I would argue that I haven't personally seen any of the true humanitarian or development interventions that have been community-owned and community-led. And this is not new. We've been talking about this for many years in the development sector. And I think the answer as to why we also know. Donors, want to come and fund projects that have predefined outcomes and objectives. And this is not how development happens. Development is a process, not an end game. But when donors fund projects in this manner, then organizations and agencies are forced to implement programming in this manner with KPIs and log frames. And while these are all very good, and I've personally presented research on very successful interventions that have supported resilience, I would argue that true resilience comes from community responses, which is what we're here talking about today. And so within the context of the humanitarian development, peace-building sector, what does that mean? It means supporting institutional development within communities so that when communities come together, they have the structures and the resources and the capacities to actually lead and own the responses. And now going back to some of the research that we've performed, in Mindanao, in southern Philippines, for example, a place that, as Jonas said, is highly climate vulnerable and also coming out of more than 4 decades of civil war, we've seen communities come together in amazing ways. And one really nice example is in a city called Munay, where there's an organization called the Munay Alliance, which is the community coming together to say, hey, we want to be more engaged in DRR and DRM. When it floods, we need to be able to organize ourselves to evacuate and support each other. We can't wait for authorities to come in. So they formed this alliance that was community-led. They registered a bandwidth on the national radio spectrum, I forget the exact term, and they handed out walkie-talkies, and they started coordinating themselves in times of hazards. And it's really nice, because it started out as a DRR, DRM intervention that was community-led, but very quickly they realized they could use it as a conflict resolution mechanism. So when 2 people began to come into conflict, before this would escalate into something much larger, they would dispatch community elders to come and mediate and squash these, we could say, squabbles before they turned into violence, which was amazing to see in practice and truly inspirational. Moving here to Sindh, IOM is implementing a very similar post-flood reconstruction project in Sindh, much smaller in scale to what SPHF is doing, but similar in aim, i.e. the wholesale reconstruction of shelters and settlements. And they use a community action planning process, which is where they come in, they form institutions, committees, within the villages where they're working, and they try to then support the communities to make developmental decisions about the intervention and how it's led. Now again, is this community-led? No, it's participation, but it's more than we see in most places, and I think that with more funding, this could be a model that can be scaled. And then finally, I've presented on this stage before research from the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And unfortunately, what does community response, what does agency look like in a context where people don't have freedom of mobility or freedom to work? It's very limited. People were stuck there. There was a very important election yesterday, and we'll see. They may be in a situation where they are pushed back into Myanmar quite soon. So what does community response look like in a refugee camp? It's a whole different question entirely, I think, but it's one that us here in Asia Pacific need to consider carefully because it's a critical issue.
That was an excellent perspective spanning a large region. He's worked in Sindh and Bangladesh as well as Philippines, and very different experiences. Because of the paucity of time, I'll take one or two questions, but please be focused and ask questions, and we'll try and
Thank you very much. To anyone who wishes to take this question, perhaps Adam, you got the least time, so maybe you've also given a comparable example here when you say Cox's Bazar, refugees, and of course other communities, where the concept of community participation kind of fails because you're dealing with, let's say, climate-induced migration displacement is a real phenomena. We all know, we have seen it. And that's where the whole idea of how do you sort of mend this rift, but also especially where there's livelihood opportunities, how do you build in that community cohesion or social cohesion, so to say, to let sort of that diversity really sort of come together. So any takers, but I'll start with you maybe. Thanks.
I'd just offer a short response. The mobility issue is very critical to resilience in many places. And I would argue that displacement is a real issue. This is something that we need to limit. This is when people forced to leave their homes. But migration is not. And migration is actually critical to livelihoods in many climate vulnerable places where you see people engaging in short-term or circular or temporary migration. We saw this in Sindh, where when people had a shelter that wasn't going to flood every time it rained, they could travel further from home to engage in economic activities. They could stay away from home longer when they didn't have to rush back to protect their families or their goods. So I think that the mobility and the livelihoods issue are interwoven everywhere that's climate vulnerable, and finding ways to support people to make decisions about their own mobility, allowing them to move in ways that is productive is what is ultimately going to support community empowered responses.
Okay, thank you very much. I wish that we had more time to discuss a lot of other facets also and get deeper into a lot of issues that our panelists have touched upon. But really, in some ways, the title is very apt, that it's really ultimately the communities which are at the heart of a lot of this effort. And it's communities that require capabilities, as Dr. Fozia Parveen has said. They require support from the state and from other organizations that Dr. Bajwa has told us, and of the local governments, as Jonas told us. So there is all those facets are important, and really ultimately the silver bullet is to bring most of those things together for communities to effectively be prepared for climate sort of contingencies, as well as for developmental issues, and ultimately also for in situations as in Cox's Bazar, where they are in refugee camps or where there are peace or conflict issues. So community strengthening is something that we all, I think a lot of people in this room work on, but that is something that we need to sort of understand in its full complexity, which hopefully we will continue to do. And thank you very much for all of you to have sat through this. And we will now move to the concluding session of the conference.